Welcome viewers to the entire story of Roman mythology. In this video, we'll embark on an epic journey through the myths, gods, heroes, and legends that shaped one of the greatest civilizations in history. Roman mythology isn't just a collection of stories, it's a tapestry woven from borrowed Greek tales, indigenous Italian beliefs, and the Romans' own unique worldview. These myths explained the world, justified conquests, and inspired art, literature, and even modern culture. Now, let's begin at the beginning, the creation of the world. Roman creation myths are sparse compared to Greek ones, often retold through poets like Ovid in his Metamorphoses. Ovid, writing in the 1st century CE, compiled a vast narrative of transformations, blending Greek and Roman lore. In the beginning, there was nothing that could be called a beginning. There was only chaos. Not the chaos we think of today, full of noise and confusion, but a vast, formless emptiness. No earth, no sky, no sea, no light, no darkness that could be distinguished from anything else. Just an unformed mass where all the seeds of everything that would ever exist floated together without shape or order. From this shapeless void, the first things slowly separated themselves. The earth appeared, heavy and solid, called Terra by the Romans or sometimes Tellus. She spread herself out beneath everything else, a broad foundation. Above her the sky stretched, wide and empty, named Caelum. Between them air gathered, thin and invisible, moving in gentle currents. Below the earth the deep pit of Tartarus opened, a dark prison of shadow. Night came into being, black and silent, and with her came day, her opposite, bringing the first pale light. Love appeared too, though not yet the playful winged boy the poets would later describe. This was a deeper force, the power that would draw things together and make order possible. Without this force nothing could have taken form. The world was still raw and unfinished. The elements fought one another. Heat battled cold, wet clashed with dry, soft struggled against hard. Nothing could hold its place. Then the great shaper arrived. Some say it was nature herself, some call it a god without name, others simply time working through unseen hands. Whatever the cause, the warring elements were forced apart. The heavy parts sank to become land. The lighter parts rose to become air and sky. Fire, the lightest and most active, was allowed to claim the highest place and became the bright burning vault of the heavens. The earth took shape. Rivers carved their beds. Mountains lifted their heads. Valleys sank between them. The sea spread out in a wide ring around the land, held back by unseen boundaries so it would not swallow everything. The sky was divided into regions. The upper air, pure and bright, became the home of the highest gods. Lower air, thicker and full of clouds, belonged to storms and winds. Still lower, close to the earth, was the misty region where birds flew and rain was born. The land itself was not empty. Plants pushed up through the soil. Trees stretched toward the light. Grasses covered the plains. Flowers opened in meadows. Fruits grew heavy on branches. Every kind of living thing appeared in its proper place, though none yet walked or swam or flew with the freedom that would come later. This was the first age, the age when the world was new and still soft, like clay before the potter's hands have finished their work. Now the gods began to take their places. The earliest ones were not like the bright Olympians who would come later. They were older, stranger, closer to the raw stuff of creation. First among them was Janus. He had two faces, one looking forward to what would come, one looking back to what had been. He was the god of doorways, of beginnings and endings, of passages from one state to another. Every gate, every threshold, every moment of transition belonged to him. The Romans would later say that he was present at the very start of things, standing at the door between chaos and cosmos, deciding what should enter the ordered world and what should remain outside. Next came Saturn, old and grave. He ruled during the Golden Age, a time when there was no war, no labor, no hunger. The earth gave food freely. Men lived like gods without fear or toil. Rivers ran with milk and honey. Trees dropped fruit into open hands. No one needed to plow or sow. Saturn's reign was peaceful, but it could not last forever. His son Jupiter would one day rise and take the throne, as fathers and sons have clashed since the beginning. With Saturn came Ops' wife, the goddess of plenty and harvest. She was the abundance of the earth made divine. Later poets would say she was the same as the Greek Rhea, mother of the great gods, but the Romans preferred to see her as their own, tied to the soil of Italy. Then came the children of Saturn and Ops. First Vesta, gentle and quiet, goddess of the hearth. She never married, never took part in the quarrels of the others. She asked only to tend the sacred fire that kept homes warm and cities alive. Every Roman house had its hearth, every temple its flame, and all belonged to Vesta. Next came Juno, proud and regal. She would become queen of the gods, wife of Jupiter, protector of marriage and women. Her jealousy would become famous, her anger terrible, but in the beginning she was simply one of the children waiting for their time. Pluto came third among the brothers, though the Romans would call him Dis or Orcus more often than Pluto. He was given the underworld when the world was divided, dark, silent, rich with the wealth hidden beneath the earth. Gold, silver, gems, he ruled over the dead and the treasures of the deep places. Neptune followed, master of the seas and all waters. He carried a trident that could shake the earth and stir the waves. His domain was wide and restless, full of storms and hidden currents. Last came Jupiter, the youngest son, but the one destined to rule. Strong, bright, commanding. He would one day lead the rebellion against his father and claim the sky for himself. There were sisters too. Ceres, goddess of grain and growing things. She would teach mortals how to plant and harvest, how to turn wild plants into food that could sustain cities. Her daughter Proserpina would one day be taken into the underworld, and the seasons would be born from that sorrow. And there were others, less remembered now, but important to the early Romans. Faunus, the wild spirit of the woods and fields. Picus, the woodpecker king, who could see the future. Silvanus, guardian of boundaries and forests. Bonadea, the good goddess whose rites were secret and women only. But the greatest change was yet to come. Saturn, warned by prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, began to swallow each newborn child as soon as it was born. He swallowed Vesta, Juno, Ceres, Pluto, Neptune. When Jupiter was born, Ops, his mother, tricked Saturn. She wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and gave him that to swallow instead. Jupiter was hidden away, raised in secret on the island of Crete, or so some stories say. Others claim he was hidden in a cave on Mount Ida, nursed by the goat Amalthea and guarded by the Curetes, who clashed their shields so Saturn would not hear the baby's cries. Jupiter grew strong. When he was ready, he returned. Some say he forced his father to vomit up the swallowed children by giving him a potion prepared by Metis or by Ops herself. Others say he simply attacked with thunder and lightning, weapons he had forged in secret. The war that followed was terrible. The Titans, older gods who had ruled with Saturn, took their father's side. Mountains were hurled, seas boiled, the sky itself rang with the sound of battle. In the end, Jupiter and his siblings won. The Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, guarded by the hundred-handed giants called Hecatoncheires and the one-eyed Cyclopes who had been freed from their prison beneath the earth. Those Cyclopes, grateful, forged for Jupiter his 3 thunderbolts, for Neptune his trident, for Pluto a helmet that granted invisibility. The world was divided. Jupiter took the sky and became king of gods and men. Neptune took the sea. Pluto took the underworld. The earth was left common to all, though mortals would live upon its surface and look up to Jupiter as their highest lord. With order established, the younger gods took their places. Venus was born, rising from the sea foam, goddess of love and beauty. Mars came next, fierce and armored, god of war, though the Romans would love him more than the Greeks loved Ares, seeing him as father of their race through his son Romulus. Mercury arrived, swift-footed, messenger of the gods, protector of travelers, merchants and thieves. Minerva sprang fully grown and armed from Jupiter's head, goddess of wisdom, crafts and just war. Apollo and Diana, twins of light and moon, archers, musicians, healers, and bringers of plague when angered. Bacchus, god of wine and madness, who would bring both joy and terror. The stage was set. The gods had their domains, their powers, their rivalries. Mortals would soon appear, shaped from clay, or born from stones, or descended from divine unions. Heroes would rise, cities would be founded, wars would be fought in heaven and on earth. The story of Rome itself would be born from these divine beginnings, when the gods walked closer to the world and their children mingled with humankind. With the gods settled in their high home on Olympus, the world below turned to the story of mortals. The earliest men were not like us. They were better in some ways, worse in others. The poets, especially Ovid in his Metamorphoses, spoke of 4 great ages, each declining from the last. First came the Golden Age, under Saturn's gentle rule before Jupiter's rise. In that time no laws were needed because no one broke them. There was no fear, no punishment, no ships cutting the waves in search of distant lands, no trumpets of war. The earth gave freely, grain grew without ploughing, rivers flowed with milk, honey dripped from oaks, spring was eternal. Men lived long and peacefully, dying as if falling asleep. When they passed, they became gentle spirits watching over the fields and woods. Then Jupiter took the throne, and the Silver Age began. Seasons appeared for the first time. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. Men had to build houses against the cold and store food against famine. They plowed the earth, yoked oxen, and learned hardship. Still they were not evil, only less noble than before. The Bronze Age followed. Men grew fiercer. Bronze weapons came into use, but no iron yet. They worked hard, fought often, but did not reach the full cruelty of later times. Last came the Iron Age, the worst of all. Virtue fled, piety vanished, brothers fought brothers, sons wished fathers dead, ships sailed for profit, not adventure, the land was scarred by mining, the sea by greed, truth and shame were gone. Faith, modesty, justice, the last of the immortals fled the blood-soaked earth. The gods watched this decline with sorrow and anger. Jupiter, seeing how corrupt men had become, decided to destroy them all. He called a council on Olympus. Some gods pleaded for mercy, but the father of gods and men was firm. He would send a flood to wipe the wicked race away and start anew. Before the deluge came another chapter in humanity's story. Prometheus, the clever Titan who had sided with Jupiter in the war against his kin, took pity on the frail creatures below. Men had fire only from lightning or volcanoes, unreliable, dangerous. Without steady fire they could not cook, warm themselves, craft tools or advance. Prometheus stole fire from heaven. Some say he lit a torch at the sun's chariot wheel. Others say he carried a spark in a fennel stalk from Hephaestus's forge. He brought it down to earth and gave it to mortals. With fire came civilization, cooking, metalworking, pottery, warmth in winter. Men could now think beyond mere survival. Jupiter was furious. He punished Prometheus harshly. The Titan was chained to a rock on Mount Caucasus, far in the east. Each day an eagle, some say sent by Jupiter himself, came and tore at his liver. At night the liver grew back, so the torment never ended. Prometheus endured this for centuries until Hercules would one day free him, to punish men for accepting the stolen gift. Jupiter ordered the creation of the first woman. Hephaestus shaped her from clay and water, giving her form like the goddesses. Athena dressed her in fine robes and taught her crafts. Aphrodite poured grace and desire over her. Hermes gave her a sharp mind, a lying tongue, and curiosity. They named her Pandora, meaning all gifted. Pandora was sent to earth with a jar. Some say a box, but the old word is pithos, a large storage jar. Inside were all the evils of the world: disease, toil, old age, vice, madness, and more. Only hope remained at the bottom. Prometheus had warned his brother Epimetheus against accepting any gift from Jupiter, but Epimetheus was foolish and took Pandora as his wife. One day, Pandora's curiosity overcame her. She opened the jar. Out flew every misery to plague humankind. She slammed the lid shut just in time to trap hope inside. So evils spread across the earth, but hope stayed with men, a comfort in suffering. Even this did not satisfy Jupiter's wrath. The Iron Age men grew worse, full of bloodshed and impiety. Giants and monsters roamed, born from the blood of earlier conflicts or from Earth itself. Jupiter resolved to drown the world. He loosed the winds, opened the sky's floodgates, commanded the rivers to burst their banks. Rain poured without cease. The sea rose, swallowing fields, cities, mountains. Men climbed the highest peaks, then drowned. Dolphins swam among treetops. Wolves and lions swam together, fleeing the same doom. Only two righteous people survived: Deucalion, son of Prometheus, and his wife Pyrrha, daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora. Warned by Prometheus, Deucalion had built a chest like a boat. They floated for 9 days and nights until the waters receded. The chest grounded on Mount Parnassus, sacred to Apollo. Deucalion and Pyrrha stepped out onto a world empty and silent. They wept for the lost race. An oracle told them to throw the bones of your great mother behind them. At first they were horrified. How could they disturb their mother's grave? Then Pyrrha understood. The great mother was earth, her bones were stones. They walked away from the mountain, throwing stones over their shoulders. The stones thrown by Deucalion became men, those by Pyrrha became women. The new race was hard, enduring, born from rock. They repopulated the earth, remembering the flood and the mercy that spared a remnant. With the world renewed, the gods turned their attention to new threats. The giants, children of earth, Gaia or Terra, rose in rebellion. Angered by the imprisonment of their kin, the Titans, and by Jupiter's rule, they sought to storm Olympus. Some say they piled mountains, Ossa on Pelion, Olympus on Ossa, to reach the sky. Others say they hurled rocks and uprooted trees. This was the Gigantomachy, the war of giants. The Olympians fought fiercely. Jupiter hurled thunderbolts. Neptune struck with his trident. Minerva fought with spear and shield. Apollo shot arrows of light. Diana joined her brother. Mars raged in armor. Even Vulcan left his forge to battle. The giants were terrible, some with snake legs, some with 100 hands. One, Enceladus, was buried under Mount Etna, where his struggles cause eruptions. Porphyrion tried to seize Juno, but Jupiter blasted him. Alcinounus was invincible on his native soil, so the gods dragged him away to die elsewhere. Typhon, the greatest monster, father of many beasts, was crushed under Sicily. The gods won, but not without help. An oracle said only a mortal could slay the giants. Hercules, son of Jupiter by a mortal woman, was summoned. With his arrows dipped in hydra poison, he killed many, including Alcyoneus and others. The victory confirmed Jupiter's rule and the Olympians' place. Yet peace was never complete among the immortals. Juno remained jealous of Jupiter's loves. Venus stirred desire and conflict. Mars delighted in war. Apollo and Mercury vied in cleverness. Neptune and Minerva competed for cities' patronage. These rivalries would spill into the world of men, shaping the age of heroes. The new race born from stones was pious at first. They built altars, offered sacrifices, honored the gods. Cities rose. Athens, under Minerva's protection, Thebes founded by Cadmus, Crete ruled by Minos. Kings claimed descent from gods, heroes performed great deeds. But the heroic age brought both glory and tragedy. Mortals grew mighty, sometimes too mighty. They challenged the gods, loved immortals, suffered divine wrath. The greatest cycle of these stories would center on the city of Troy and the war that destroyed it, a war caused by a golden apple, a stolen wife, and the anger of rejected goddesses. Before Troy fell, however, other tales unfolded, of Perseus slaying Medusa, of Theseus killing the Minotaur, of the Argonauts seeking the Golden Fleece, of Hercules and his 12 labors. These heroes bridged the divine and human worlds, their bloodlines mixing god and mortal, and from those lines would come Aeneas, survivor of Troy, who carried his father from burning walls and led his people to Italy, where his descendants would found Rome itself. But first, the stage for Troy must be set. The new race born from stones was hardy and God-fearing, but the world remained wild. Monsters still walked the earth, descended from older beings or born from the anger of the gods. Heroes arose to tame them, men and women with divine blood in their veins, strong enough to challenge fate and sometimes foolish enough to defy the immortals. Their deeds filled the age between the flood and the fall of Troy. One of the earliest great tales began with Cadmus, prince of Tyre, in Phoenicia. His sister Europa had been carried away by Jupiter in the form of a white bull. Cadmus was sent by his father to find her or never return. He wandered far, asking the oracle at Delphi where he should settle. The oracle told him to follow a cow until it lay down to rest. There he would found a city. He followed the cow across lands until it stopped in Boeotia, in the heart of Greece. Cadmus meant to sacrifice the cow to the gods, but when he sent his men to fetch water from a nearby spring, they did not return. The spring belonged to Ares, guarded by a great serpent, some say a son of the war god himself. The dragon killed the men. Cadmus fought and slew it, striking its head with a stone and then driving a spear through its throat. Athena appeared and told him to sow the dragon's teeth in the earth. From the soil sprang armed warriors, the Spartoi, the sown men. They fought one another until only 5 remained. These 5 helped Cadmus build the city that would become Thebes. The citadel was called the Cadmea. Cadmus married Harmonia, daughter of Ares and Aphrodite, and their wedding was attended by the gods. But the curse of the dragon lingered. Cadmus and Harmonia would one day be turned into serpents as punishment for the killing. From Cadmus's line came the royal house of Thebes, a family marked by glory and tragedy. Oedipus, Antigone, the 7 against Thebes, and more. But that sorrow lay in the future. Across the sea another hero rose, Perseus, son of Jupiter and Danae. His grandfather Acrisius, king of Argos, had been told by an oracle that his daughter's son would kill him. To prevent this, Acrisius locked Danae in a bronze tower. Jupiter descended as golden rain, entered the tower, and Danae bore a son, Perseus. When Acrisius discovered the child, he refused to believe the father was a god. He set mother and son adrift in a wooden chest on the sea. They washed ashore on the island of Seriphos, where the fisherman Dictys took them in. Dictys' brother Polydectes was king. Polydectes desired Danae and saw Perseus as an obstacle. He pretended to plan a wedding and demanded that every noble bring a horse as a gift. Perseus, having no horse, boasted he would bring the head of Medusa instead. Polydectes laughed and held him to the promise, hoping the quest would kill him. Medusa was one of the 3 Gorgons, daughters of Phorcys and Ceto. 2 were immortal. Medusa was mortal. All had snakes for hair, brass hands, golden wings, and eyes that turned anyone who met their gaze to stone. They lived far away, near the edge of the world. The gods helped Perseus. Athena gave him a polished bronze shield to use as a mirror, so he would not look directly at Medusa. Hermes gave him a sickle of adamant and winged sandals. Hades lent his cap of darkness for invisibility. The Graeae, 3 old women who shared one eye and one tooth, knew the way to the nymphs who guarded the tools Perseus needed. Perseus stole their eye and forced them to reveal the location. He flew to the Gorgon's lair, finding Medusa asleep. He used the shield's reflection to guide his hand, and struck off her head with the sickle. From her neck sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the warrior with a golden sword. Perseus stuffed the head into a bag given by the nymphs. As he flew home, he passed the land of the Ethiopians, ruled by King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia had boasted that her daughter Andromeda was more beautiful than the Nereids. The sea nymphs complained to Neptune, who sent a sea monster to ravage the coast. The oracle said the monster could only be stopped by sacrificing Andromeda. She was chained to a rock by the sea. Perseus saw her, fell in love at once, and offered to slay the beast if she would marry him. Her parents agreed. When the monster came, Perseus flew above it, struck with sword and sickle, and finally used Medusa's head to turn the creature to stone. He freed Andromeda and married her. They had many children, whose descendants would rule in Argos and Mycenae. On the way back to Seriphos, Perseus stopped at the wedding of his grandfather's brother. A fight broke out, and Perseus used the Gorgon head to turn his enemies to stone. He returned to Seriphos, showed Polydectes the head, and turned the wicked king and his court to stone statues. He gave the kingdom to Dictys. Perseus returned the borrowed gifts to the gods. He gave the head of Medusa to Athena, who set it on her shield, the Aegis. Then he sailed to Argos with Danae and Andromeda. Acrisius, hearing of his grandson's return, fled to Larissa. There, during funeral games, Perseus threw a discus that struck Acrisius and killed him, fulfilling the oracle. Perseus, grieving, did not take the throne of Argos but exchanged kingdoms with his cousin Megapenthus and founded Mycenae instead. While Perseus' name lived on in the stars, his mother Dana, Andromeda, Cepheus, Cassiopeia, and the sea monster all became constellations. The greatest name of the heroic age belonged to Heracles, son of Jupiter and the mortal Alcmena. Alcmene's husband Amphitryon was away at war when Jupiter took his shape and lay with her. She bore twins, Hercules, son of Jupiter, and Iphicles, son of Amphitryon. Juno, hating Jupiter's infidelity, sent 2 serpents to kill the infant Hercules in his cradle. The baby grasped the snakes, one in each hand, and strangled them. This was the first sign of his strength. As a youth, Heracles was taught by the best teachers: archers by Teutrus, wrestling by Autolycus, music by Linus. When Linus struck him for a wrong note, Heracles killed him with his own lyre. Amphitryon, fearing the boy's temper, sent him to tend cattle in the hills. There the young Heracles met 2 women, Virtue and Vice. Vice offered easy pleasure, Virtue offered hard-won glory. Heracles chose the path of virtue. Later, madness sent by Juno drove him to kill his own wife Megara and their children. When sanity returned, he went to Delphi to ask how to atone. The oracle told him to serve his cousin Eurystheus, king of Mycenae and Tiryns, for 12 years and perform whatever labors he commanded. Eurystheus, advised by Juno, gave impossible tasks, hoping to destroy Heracles. The first labor was to slay the Nemean lion, whose skin no weapon could pierce. Hercules strangled it with his bare hands, then skinned it with its own claws. He wore the impenetrable hide ever after. The second was to kill the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent with many heads. Some say 9, some 100, that grew 2 heads for every one cut off. Heracles cut heads while his nephew Iolaus cauterized the stumps with fire to prevent regrowth. When the last immortal head was reached, Heracles buried it under a rock. He dipped his arrows in the Hydra's poisonous blood, making them deadly. The third labor was to capture the golden hind of Artemis, sacred to the goddess. Heracles chased it for a year before catching it alive, then returned it unharmed. The fourth was to capture the Erymanthian boar. He drove it into deep snow, trapped it, and brought it back alive to Eurystheus, who hid in a bronze jar in fear. The fifth was to clean the Ogyges stables in one day. King Ogyges had thousands of cattle, but never cleaned the stables. Heracles diverted 2 rivers, Alpheus and Peneus, to wash the filth away. Ogyges tried to cheat him of his reward, so Heracles later sacked the city. The sixth was to drive away the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with bronze beaks and feathers like arrows. Athena gave Heracles bronze castanets made by Hephaestus. He clashed them. frightening the birds into flight, then shot them with his poisoned arrows. The seventh was to capture the Cretan bull, a mighty beast sent mad by Poseidon. Heracles wrestled it, subdued it, and brought it to Eurystheus, who set it free. It later roamed Marathon, until Theseus would face it. The eighth was to steal the mares of Diomedes, man-eating horses. Hercules fed them their owner Diomedes, tamed them, and brought them to Eurystheus. The ninth was to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Hippolyta agreed to give it freely, but Juno stirred the Amazons to attack. Heracles fought and killed Hippolyta, taking the girdle. The 10th was to steal the cattle of Geryon, a three-bodied giant living on an island in the far west. Heracles crossed the sea, killed the two-headed dog Orthrus and the giant Eurytion, then drove the cattle back across Europe and Africa, setting up the Pillars of Heracles at the Strait of Gibraltar. The 11th was to fetch the golden apples of the Hesperides. These grew in a garden guarded by a 100-headed dragon and the nymphs. Heracles tricked Atlas, who held up the sky, into fetching the apples. While Heracles briefly bore the heavens on his shoulders, he returned the sky and left with the apples. The 12th and final labor was to bring Cerberus, the three-headed hound of the underworld, to the upper world. Hercules descended into Hades, wrestled the dog, and brought it to Eurystheus without harming it. Cerberus was returned to the underworld. With the labors complete, Hercules was free, but his story continued. Further adventures, loves, wars, and eventual death by poison from a centaur's shirt, followed by apotheosis to Olympus. Meanwhile, in Athens, another hero rose, Theseus, son of Aegeus, king of Athens, and either Aethra or Poseidon. Aegeus had left a sword and sandals under a rock in Troezen. When Theseus could lift the rock, he was to bring them to Athens and claim his birthright. Theseus lifted the rock, took the tokens, and set out for Athens. Along the road he met bandits and monsters, Periphetes with his club, Cenis, who bent pines to tear travelers apart, the Crommyonian Sow, Sciron, who kicked men off cliffs into the sea, where a giant turtle devoured them, Cercion the wrestler, and Procrustes, who stretched or chopped victims to fit his bed. Theseus killed them all, using their own methods against them. He arrived in Athens a hero. Aegeus welcomed him, but did not yet reveal his parentage. Medea, now Aegeus's wife, recognized the danger and tried to poison Theseus. Aegeus knocked the cup away at the last moment. Recognizing the sword, father and son were reunited. Theseus then faced the Marathon bull, the same Cretan bull Heracles had captured. He wrestled and subdued it, but greater danger loomed. Minos of Crete demanded 7 youths and 7 maidens every 9 years as tribute to feed the Minotaur, a monster half man, half bull, kept in the labyrinth built by Daedalus. Theseus volunteered to go as one of the youths, determined to slay the beast and end the tribute. That story, and the voyage of the Argonauts in search of the Golden Fleece, belong to the next great chapters of the heroic age. The heroic age produced many great quests, but few match the fame of the search for the Golden Fleece. The fleece belonged to a golden ram that had once saved the children of Athamas, king of Boeotia. Phrixus and Hele, fleeing their wicked stepmother Ino, rowed the ram across the sea. Hele fell into the water that became the Hellespont. Phrixus reached Colchis on the eastern shore of the Black Sea. There he sacrificed the ram to Zeus and hung its fleece in a grove sacred to Ares, guarded by a sleepless dragon. Years later, Peleus, king of Iolcus in Thessaly, heard a prophecy that he would be overthrown by a man wearing one sandal. When Jason, son of the rightful king Aeson, arrived in town wearing only one sandal, he had lost the other, helping an old woman cross a river who was Hera in disguise. Peleus grew afraid. He sent Jason on what he thought was an impossible quest: bring back the Golden Fleece. If Jason succeeded, Peleus promised to yield the throne. Jason gathered the greatest heroes of the age. They became known as the Argonauts, named after their ship, the Argo, built by Argus with Athena's help. Its prow was made from an oak beam from Dodona, sacred to Zeus, and could speak prophecies. The crew included Hercules and his nephew Hylas, Orpheus the musician, Castor and Pollux the Dioscuri, Telamon and Peleus, fathers of Ajax and Achilles, Meliger the hunter, Atalanta the huntress in some versions, Theseus, and many others. They set sail from Iolcus. Their first stop was Lemnos, where the women had killed all the men in a madness sent by Aphrodite. The Argonauts stayed a time, fathering children, before continuing. They passed through the Hellespont and reached the land of the Doliones. King Cyzicus welcomed them, but later in the night the Doliones mistook them for enemies and attacked. In the dark battle, Cyzicus was killed by Jason. When dawn revealed the truth, The Argonauts mourned and held funeral games. Next they came to the land of the Bebryces, where the boxing king Amycus challenged all strangers to fight. Pollux accepted and beat him to death with his fists. They reached the Bithynian coast, where the prophet Phineus lived. Phineus had been blinded by the gods for revealing too many secrets. Worse, whenever food was set before him, the Harpies, winged monsters with women's faces, swooped down, snatched most of it, and fouled the rest with their droppings. Phineus told the Argonauts his torment would end if they drove the Harpies away. The sons of Boreas, Zetes and Calais, who had wings themselves, chased the Harpies into the air. The creatures fled to an island beyond which the brothers could not pursue, for the gods had set a boundary. Phineus was freed from his torment and, in gratitude, gave the Argonauts advice for the rest of their journey. The greatest danger lay ahead: the clashing rocks, the Symplegades. These huge cliffs at the entrance to the Black Sea crashed together whenever a ship tried to pass, crushing anything between them. Phineus told them to send a dove ahead. If the bird passed safely, they should row with all speed. If it was crushed, turn back. They released a dove. It flew through just as the rocks parted, losing only its tail feathers. The Argonauts rowed furiously. Athena herself pushed the ship through at the last moment. The rocks clashed behind them, and according to prophecy, were fixed forever after, no longer moving. They sailed on to Colchis, ruled by King Aeetes, son of Helios the sun god. Aeetes kept the fleece in a grove guarded by a dragon that never slept. Jason asked for the fleece. Aeetes agreed on condition that Jason perform 2 tasks: yoke 2 fire-breathing bulls with bronze hooves and plow a field, then sow dragon's teeth and fight the armed men that sprang up. Medea, daughter of Aeetes and priestess of Hecate, fell in love with Jason, some say through Eros's arrow sent by Hera and Aphrodite, who wanted to help Jason. Medea, skilled in magic, gave Jason ointments to protect him from fire and steel. She also told him how to defeat the sown men. When they rose armed, throw a stone among them so they would fight one another in confusion. Jason anointed himself and his weapons. He yoked the bulls, plowed the field, and sowed the teeth. Warriors sprang up, shining in bronze armor. Jason hurled a stone into their midst. The men turned on each other and fought until only a few remained, whom Jason cut down. Aeetes, seeing his tasks completed, still refused to give the fleece. He planned to burn the Argo and kill the crew. Medea warned Jason. That night she led him to the grove. She sang spells to put the dragon to sleep. Jason took the fleece from the tree. They hurried back to the ship. Aeetes discovered the theft and set out in pursuit. Medea, to slow her father, killed her brother Apsyrtus and scattered his limbs across the sea. Aeetes stopped to gather the pieces for proper burial, allowing the Argo to escape. Their return was long and perilous. They passed the Sirens, but Orpheus drowned their song with his lyre. They navigated Scylla and Charybdis, with help from Thetis and the Nereids. They landed on Crete, where Talos, the bronze giant who guarded the island, threw rocks at them. Medea tricked Talos into removing the bronze plug at his ankle, letting his life fluid drain out. He fell and died. They reached Iolcus at last. Peleteus refused to give up the throne. Medea, seeking revenge, tricked Peleteus's daughters into killing him. She demonstrated her magic by cutting up an old ram, boiling it with herbs, and bringing forth a young lamb. The daughters tried the same on Peleteus. They cut him up and boiled him, but no youth emerged. Peleteus died, and the people drove Jason and Medea from the city. They fled to Corinth. There Jason later abandoned Medea to marry Crisa, daughter of King Creon, hoping to secure a stronger alliance. Medea, betrayed, sent a poisoned robe and crown to the bride. When Crisa put them on, she burst into flames, as did her father when he tried to help her. Medea then killed her own children by Jason to wound him most deeply. She fled in a chariot drawn by dragons sent by her grandfather Helios. Jason was left broken, dying alone years later when the rotting Argo fell on him as he slept beneath its stern. While the Argonauts' fame spread across Greece, another line of heroes suffered in Thebes. The curse on the house of Cadmus continued through generations. Laius, a descendant of Cadmus, became king of Thebes. He abducted Chrysippus, son of Pelops, and was cursed for it. If he had a son, that son would kill him. Laius married Jocasta, but fearing the prophecy, he pierced the ankles of their newborn son and left him on Mount Kithaeron to die. A shepherd found the baby and took him to Corinth, where King Polybus and Queen Merope, childless, raised him as their own. They named him Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, because of the scars on his ankles. Years later, at a banquet, a drunk taunted Oedipus that he was not Polybus's true son. Troubled, Oedipus went to Delphi to ask the oracle about his parents. The oracle told him he was fated to kill his father and marry his mother. Believing Polybus and Merope were his parents, Oedipus fled Corinth to avoid the prophecy. On the road he met a chariot carrying an old man, Laius, though neither knew the other. They quarreled over right of way. Oedipus killed Laius and most of his men, sparing only one servant who fled. Oedipus continued to Thebes. The city was plagued by the Sphinx, a monster with a woman's head, lion's body, and wings. She sat on a rock outside the city and asked every passerby a riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? Those who failed were devoured. Oedipus answered, Man. He crawls on all 4s as a baby, walks on 2 legs as an adult, and uses a cane in old age. The Sphinx, defeated, threw herself from the rock and died. The grateful Thebans made Oedipus king. He married the widowed queen Jocasta, unaware she was his mother. They had 4 children, Eteocles, Polynices, Antigone, and Ismene. Years passed in prosperity, until a plague struck Thebes. Crops failed, children died, livestock perished. The oracle at Delphi said the plague would end only when the murderer of Laius was driven from the city. Oedipus, determined to save his people, sent Creon, his brother-in-law, to Delphi. Creon returned with the message. Oedipus swore to find and punish the killer. He summoned the blind prophet Tiresias. Tiresias at first refused to speak, but Oedipus pressed him. The prophet declared that the murderer was a Theban, a man who had killed his father and married his mother. Oedipus, thinking Tiresias was plotting with Creon to seize the throne, accused them both. Jocasta tried to calm him, telling how Laius had been killed at a crossroads by an unknown stranger. Oedipus remembered the fight on the road and began to fear. He sent for the surviving servant. Meanwhile, a messenger arrived from Corinth. Polybus had died, and the people wanted Oedipus as king. Oedipus rejoiced that he had not killed his father, but the messenger revealed that Polybus and Merope were not his birth parents. Oedipus had been found as a baby on the mountain. The old servant was brought in. Under pressure, he confessed. He had been ordered by Jocasta and Laius to kill the child, but had pitied him and given him to the Corinthian shepherd instead. The truth crashed down. Oedipus had killed his father Laius. He had married his mother Jocasta. The children he loved were both his offspring and his siblings. Jocasta, realizing everything, ran into the palace and hanged herself. Oedipus found her body, took the brooches from her robe, and blinded himself with them, saying he should not see the light after what he had done. The plague lifted, but Thebes was shattered. Oedipus, now blind, was at first banished by Creon, who became regent. Later, in some versions, his sons Eteocles and Polynices locked him away, hoping to avoid the curse on their line. Oedipus cursed them. They would die by each other's hand. He wandered into exile, led by his faithful daughter Antigone. Years later, he came to Colonus, near Athens. There, at a sacred grove of the Furies, he found his final rest. Theseus, king of Athens, protected him. The gods took Oedipus away in a flash of light, and his grave became a secret blessing to the land. But the curse lived on. Eteocles and Polynices agreed to share the throne of Thebes, ruling in alternate years. Eteocles took power first and refused to yield it when his year ended. Polynices, exiled, gathered an army of 7 champions, including Adrastus of Argos, Tydeus, Capaneus, Parthenopaeus, Hippomedon, Amphiaraus, and himself, to march against Thebes. This war, the 7 against Thebes, would bring more blood and sorrow to the cursed house. The curse on the house of Oedipus did not end with his blinding and exile. It passed like a dark inheritance to his sons Eteocles and Polynices, who had been left to rule Thebes after their father's fall. In the beginning they agreed to share the throne, each reigning for 1 year in turn, while the other lived in exile. Eteocles took the first year. When the time came to yield power, he refused. He fortified the city, gathered loyal captains, and declared himself sole king. Polynices, driven from Thebes, fled to Argos. In Argos, Polynices found refuge with King Adrastus. One night, Adrastus awoke from a dream in which 2 wild beasts, a boar and a lion, fought at his hearth. The next morning he saw Polynices and Tydeus, another exiled warrior who had killed his brother in a quarrel over hunting dogs, quarreling over a place at table. Tydeus wore a boar's hide, Polynices a lion's skin. Adrastus recognized the dream's fulfillment and gave his daughters in marriage to the 2 men, Argia to Polynices, Deipyle to Tydeus. He promised to restore both to their thrones. Adrastus gathered 6 other champions to march with Polynices against Thebes, making 7 in all, a sacred number. The leaders were Adrastus himself, king of Argos, driving his swift chariot; Polynices, seeking his rightful crown; Tydeus, fierce and hot-tempered, son of Otinius of Calydon; Capaneus, arrogant and blasphemous, who boasted he would burn Thebes even if the gods opposed him; Hippomedon, mighty in battle, devoted to war; Parthenopaeus, the virgin-born Arcadian, beautiful and deadly with the bow, son of Atalanta; Amphiaraus, the seer and prophet, husband of Ariphile. He knew the expedition was doomed. He had foreseen his own death, but his wife Ariphile, bribed by Polynices with the golden necklace of Harmonia, forced him to go. Amphiaraus made his sons swear to avenge him by killing their mother and marching again against Thebes in the next generation. The 7 champions set out. They marched through Nemea, where the infant Opheltes was killed by a serpent while his nurse Hypsipyle showed them a spring. They held funeral games for the child, the first Nemean games, and continued. They reached Thebes and encamped before its 7 gates. Eteocles had prepared defenses. He appointed 7 captains to each gate, matching the attackers man for man. The battle was terrible. Tydeus fought like a lion at the gate of Protus. He killed many, including Melanippus, but was wounded by him in return. Amphiaraus drove his chariot through the enemy lines, slaying foes until the earth opened and swallowed him whole, chariot and all, sparing him a death in battle, as the gods honored his piety. Capaneus scaled the walls with a ladder, shouting defiance at the gods. As he reached the top, Jupiter struck him with a thunderbolt. His body fell burning. Parthenopaeus was killed by Periclymenus at the Electran Gate. Hippomedon drowned in a river swollen by the gods to stop the Argive advance. Polynices and Eteocles met at last before the city. They fought in single combat, brother against brother. Each drove his spear through the other's chest. They died locked together in hatred and blood. Their bodies were carried off the field. Adrastus alone survived, fleeing on his divine horse Arion. The Argive army was destroyed. Creon, Jocasta's brother, took the throne of Thebes as regent for Laodamas, son of Thepsales. Creon issued a decree. Eteocles would be buried with full honors as defender of the city. Polynices, the invader, would lie unburied on the plain, his body food for dogs and birds. Anyone who attempted to bury him would be stoned to death. Antigone, daughter of Oedipus, could not bear this. She had followed her father into exile and returned after his death. Now she saw her brother's corpse defiled. She argued with her sister Ismay, who feared Creon's law, but Antigone resolved to act. By night she went to the plain, poured libations of wine and honey, and scattered dust over Polynices' body, enough to fulfill the rites of burial in the eyes of the gods. Guards caught her in the act on her second visit, when she returned to anoint the body properly. They brought her before Creon. Creon, inflexible, condemned her to death. He ordered her walled up alive in a stone tomb outside the city. Haemon, Creon's son and Antigone's betrothed, pleaded for her life. He argued that the people secretly pitied her and honored her courage. Creon grew angry, accusing Haemon of being swayed by love. Haemon left in silence. The prophet Tityrasias came to Creon with warnings. The gods were displeased. Altars were fouled by carrion from Polynices' body. Birds gave ill omens. Sacrifices would not burn. Tityrasias foretold that Creon would pay with a child of his own blood for his stubbornness. Creon at first refused to listen, accusing Tityrasias of bribery, but the chorus and the elders urged him to relent. At last Creon yielded. He ordered Polynices buried and hurried to free Antigone. They found the tomb too late. Antigone had hanged herself with her veil. Haemon, embracing her body, drove his sword into his side and died beside her. Creon returned to the city broken. His wife Eurydice, hearing of Haemon's death, killed herself in the palace. Creon was left alone, ruler of a city stained with blood and divine anger. Years later, the sons of the fallen Argive champions, the Epigoni, grew to manhood. They included Alcmaeon, son of Amphiaraus, Diomedes, son of Tydeus, Sthenelus, son of Capaneus, Promachus, son of Parthenopaeus, Agelaeus, son of Adrastus, and others. They marched again against Thebes to avenge their fathers. This time the gods favored them. They took the city. Laodamas, king of Thebes, was killed. The Epigoni sacked the city, but spared the inhabitants in some accounts. Alcmaeon killed his mother Eriphyle for her treachery, fulfilling his father's command, but the Furies pursued him for matricide until he found purification. With Thebes humbled, the heroic age turned toward its greatest conflict, the Trojan War. The seeds of that war were sown long before, in the marriage of Peletius and Thetis, and the judgment of a shepherd prince. Peleus, son of Aeacus, king of the Myrmidons, had married the sea nymph Thetis. After many trials, all the gods attended the wedding except Eris, goddess of strife, who was not invited. In anger, she threw a golden apple among the guests inscribed, "To the fairest." Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite each claimed it. Zeus, unwilling to judge, sent the three goddesses to Mount Ida, where Paris, son of Priam, king of Troy, tended flocks. Paris was a handsome youth, once exposed as an infant because of a prophecy that he would bring ruin to Troy, but saved and raised as a shepherd. The goddesses appeared to him. Hera promised power and wealth if he chose her. Athena offered wisdom and victory in war. Aphrodite promised the love of the fairest woman in the world. Helen, wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. Paris gave the apple to Aphrodite. She in turn helped him win Helen. Paris visited Sparta as a guest of Menelaus. While Menelaus was away in Crete, Paris seduced Helen or carried her off. Accounts differ. They fled to Troy with much treasure. Some say Helen went willingly, enchanted by Aphrodite's power. Others say she was taken by force but grew to love Paris. Menelaus returned and found his wife gone. He called on the other Greek kings, bound by the oath of Tyndareus. Years earlier, when Helen was to be married, all her suitors swore to defend the chosen husband's rights. Menelaus invoked that oath. Agamemnon, his brother and king of Mycenae, the most powerful of the Greeks, organized the expedition. Heroes answered the call. Achilles, son of Peleus and Thetis, greatest warrior, nearly invulnerable except for his heel. Ajax the Great, son of Telamon. Ajax the Lesser. Diomedes. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, cleverest of men. Nestor of Pylos, old but wise. Patroclus, Achilles' dear friend, and many others. They gathered 1,000 ships at Aulis. Before sailing, the winds failed. The seer Calchas declared that Artemis was angry because Agamemnon had killed a sacred stag and boasted he surpassed her in hunting. To appease her, Agamemnon must sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia. He sent for her, under pretext of marriage, to Achilles. At the last moment, in some versions, Artemis substituted a deer and carried Iphigenia away to Taurus. In others, the sacrifice was carried out. The winds rose, and the fleet sailed for Troy. Thus began the 10-year siege that would end the heroic age and launch countless tales of valor, betrayal, love, and loss. But the full story of Troy, Achilles' wrath, Hector's death, the wooden horse, the fall of the city, and the wanderings of the survivors belongs to the greatest cycle of them all, the one that leads directly to the founding of Rome through Aeneas. The Trojan War was not a sudden storm. It had been gathering for years, fed by divine rivalries, human ambition, and the slow turning of fate. When Paris, prince of Troy, awarded the golden apple to Aphrodite and received Helen as his reward, he did not merely steal a queen, he violated Xenia, the sacred bond of guest friendship, and set in motion a chain that would destroy his city and end the age of heroes. Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world, had been married to Menelaus of Sparta. Her suitors, the flower of Greek nobility, had sworn an oath before her father Tyndareus, or her mortal father in some versions, to defend whichever man she chose. When Paris carried her off, whether by force or with her willing consent, the stories vary, he carried off not just a wife but the honor of every Greek king who had sworn that oath. Menelaus appealed to his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, the most powerful ruler in Greece. Agamemnon sent heralds across the land. Most heroes answered. Achilles from Phthia, greatest warrior alive, son of Polyrus and the sea nymph Thetis, his close companion Patroclus, Ajax son of Telamon, towering and unbreakable, Odysseus of Ithaca, cunning beyond measure, Diomedes of Argos, Nestor of Pylos, old but full of wise counsel, the two Ajaxes, Idomeneus of Crete, and hundreds more. 1,000 ships gathered at Aulis. Before they could sail, the winds died. Calchas the seer revealed that Artemis demanded the sacrifice of Agamemnon's eldest daughter, Iphigenia, to atone for the king's boast that he surpassed the goddess in hunting. Agamemnon sent for Iphigenia under the pretext of marriage to Achilles. She came in bridal robes. At the altar, in the Greek tradition, she was sacrificed, or in kinder versions preserved by Euripides and others. Artemis substituted a deer and carried Iphigenia to Taurus to serve as her priestess. The winds rose. The fleet sailed for Troy. They landed first on the island of Tenedos, then on the mainland near the Scamander River. The Trojans, led by Priam the old king and his eldest son Hector, met them on the plain. The first battles were fierce but inconclusive. The Greeks could not take the high walls of Troy, built by Apollo and Poseidon in an earlier age. The Trojans could not drive the invaders into the sea, so began a long siege. 9 years of raids, skirmishes, duels, plague, and weary waiting. During those years, Achilles became the terror of Troy. He sacked 12 coastal cities allied to Troy and 11 on the mainland. He killed Cycnus, son of Neptune, who could not be wounded by iron. He captured Lyrnessus and took Chrysalis, daughter of Apollo's priest Chrysace. Agamemnon took Briseis, another captive woman, from Achilles' share of the spoils. In the 10th year the war reached its crisis. Chryses came to the Greek camp begging for his daughter's return, offering ransom. Agamemnon insulted him and drove him away. Chryses prayed to Apollo. The god sent plague arrows into the camp. Dogs and mules died first, then men. The pyres burned day and night. Achilles called an assembly. Calchas, protected by Achilles, revealed that Apollo was angry because of Chryses. Agamemnon agreed to return her, but demanded compensation. He took Chryses from Achilles. Achilles, enraged at the insult to his honor, withdrew from battle. He swore he would not fight again until the Greeks begged for his help. He retired to his ships with Patroclus and his Myrmidons. Thetis, his mother, went to Zeus on Olympus and begged him to grant victory to the Trojans so the Greeks would feel their need for Achilles. Zeus nodded assent, setting the stage for tragedy. Without Achilles, the Greeks suffered. Hector led charge after charge. The Trojans pushed the Greeks back to their ships. Agamemnon sent an embassy. Odysseus, Ajax, and Phoenix to offer rich gifts and the return of Briseis untouched. Achilles refused. He would sail home to Phthia rather than fight for men who dishonored him. Patroclus, watching the ships burn, begged to wear Achilles' armor and lead the Myrmidons to drive the Trojans back. Achilles agreed, but warned him not to attack the walls of Troy. Patroclus donned the armor. The Trojans, seeing Achilles' helmet, thought the great warrior had returned. They fled. Patroclus pursued, killing many, including Sarpedon, son of Zeus. But he disobeyed Achilles and attacked the walls. Apollo struck him from behind, dazed him. Euphorbus wounded him. Hector drove his spear through Patroclus's side and stripped the armor. Achilles learned of Patroclus's death. Grief consumed him. He refused food, refused sleep. The Thetis brought him new armor, forged by Hephaestus, greaves, corselet, shield with the cosmos depicted in silver and gold, a helmet with a crest of horsehair. Achilles armed himself, reconciled briefly with Agamemnon, who returned Briseis and swore he had never touched her. The Greeks feasted and prepared for battle. Achilles drove the Trojans from the ships. He filled the Scamander River with bodies until the river god rose in anger. Achilles fought even the river, until Hephaestus sent fire to dry the waters. He pursued the fleeing Trojans to the gates. Priam watched from the walls, begging Hector to come inside. Andromache, Hector's wife, pleaded with him, holding their infant son Astyanax. Hector knew he must face Achilles or be shamed forever. They met on the plain. Hector turned and ran 3 times around the walls. At last Athena, in the form of Deiphobus, Hector's brother, gave him courage to stand. They fought. Achilles' spear pierced Hector's throat where the armor gapped. Hector fell. Achilles stripped him, tied his body to his chariot, and dragged it 3 times around the walls while Priam and Hector wailed from above. Andromache fainted at the sight. For 12 days, Achilles dragged the body. The gods preserved it from decay. On the 12th night, Priam, guided by Hermes, came alone to Achilles' tent. He kissed the hands that had killed his son and begged for Hector's body. Achilles, moved by pity and remembering his own father, wept. He gave the body back, granted a truce for funeral rites, and held Hector's funeral games. The Iliad ends here, with Hector's pyre burning and the city mourning, but the war continued. Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, arrived with her warrior women to aid Troy. She fought bravely, killing many Greeks, until Achilles met her. He slew her, and seeing her beauty, fell in love with her in death. Thebrasites mocked him for it. Achilles killed Thebrasites in anger. Memnon, son of the dawn goddess Eos and king of the Ethiopians, came next. He killed Antilochus, Nestor's son, who had saved his father. Achilles avenged him by killing Memnon in single combat. Eos wept tears of amber for her son. Achilles himself was fated to die soon after Hector. He drove the Trojans back again and again. At last, during a battle near the Scalene Gates, Paris, guided by Apollo, shot an arrow into Achilles' heel, the only vulnerable spot. Achilles fell dead. A fierce fight raged over his body. Ajax and Odysseus carried it back to the ships. Thetis and the Nereids mourned with unearthly cries. The Greeks held funeral games. Thetis gave his arms, forged by Hephaestus, as the prize to the worthiest. Odysseus and Ajax both claimed them. The Greek leaders judged, or in some versions the Trojan captives voted. Odysseus won by his eloquence. Ajax, mad with shame and rage, slaughtered the Greeks' cattle in the night, thinking they were his enemies. When he awoke and saw what he had done, he fell on his sword and died. From his blood sprang the hyacinth flower, marked with the letters Ai, Ai, his cry of woe. The war dragged on. Philoctetes, abandoned on Lemnos years earlier because of a festering snakebite, was fetched back. He carried the bow of Hercules. He killed Paris with a poisoned arrow. Paris's body was desecrated. His wives Oeno and Helen mourned differently. Helenus, another son of Priam and a seer, was captured. He revealed that Troy could not fall until the Palladium, the sacred image of Athena, was taken from the citadel. Odysseus and Diomedes crept into the city by night and stole it. Still the walls stood. Odysseus devised the final stratagem. A huge wooden horse, hollow inside, offered as a gift to Athena for safe return home. The Greeks pretended to sail away, leaving Sinon behind to claim the horse was an atonement offering. The Trojans, against the warnings of Laocoon and Cassandra, dragged the horse inside the walls as a trophy. That night, the chosen Greek warriors, Odysseus, Menelaus, Diomedes and others climbed out through a hidden door. They opened the gates. The Greek fleet returned under cover of darkness. Troy was sacked. Men, women, children were killed or enslaved. Priam was slain at the altar of Zeus by Neoptolemus, son of Achilles. Astyanax was thrown from the walls. Cassandra was taken by Agamemnon. Andromache became the slave of Neoptolemus. Polyxena, youngest daughter of Priam, was sacrificed on Achilles' tomb. The city burned for days. The gods watched in sorrow and anger. Athena turned against the Greeks for the violation of her temple. Poseidon, who had built the walls, mourned his work. Hera rejoiced at Troy's fall. The survivors scattered. Agamemnon returned home to Mycenae, only to be murdered by his wife Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus. Menelaus and Helen reconciled and returned to Sparta. Odysseus began his long wanderings. Nestor reached Pylos safely. Many others perished at sea or on strange shores, punished for sacrilege during the sack. Aeneas, son of Anchises and Aphrodite, was one of the few great Trojans to escape. In the Greek accounts he fought bravely, but was spared because of prophecies that his line would rule in the future. In the Roman tradition, especially Virgil's Aeneid, written centuries later to glorify Rome, Aeneas became the central figure of piety and destiny. When Troy fell, Aeneas fought to the last, but the gods, Venus his mother, and the Penates, household gods, commanded him to flee. He carried his aged father Anchises on his shoulders, led his young son Ascanius, also called Iülus, by the hand, and bore the sacred images of the household gods. His wife Creusa perished in the confusion, but her ghost appeared to bid him go. With a small band of survivors, Aeneas escaped the burning city. They wandered for years, first to Thrace, then to Delos, Crete, Sicily, Carthage, where he loved Queen Dido, who killed herself when he left under divine command, and finally to Latium in Italy. There, welcomed by King Latinus, he married Lavinia, daughter of Latinus. He founded Lavinium. His son Ascanius founded Alba Longa. From that line, centuries later, Romulus and Remus would be born, and Rome itself, thus the fall of Troy, gave birth to Rome. The gods who destroyed one city blessed another. Jupiter's plan unfolded. From the ashes of Ilium rose the eternal city. The heroic age ended in blood and fire, but its stories lived on in Greek song, in Roman epic, in temples and statues across the Mediterranean. The gods withdrew from direct mingling with men, but their power and their quarrels shaped the world forever. When the walls of Troy crumbled under the weight of Greek treachery and divine wrath, not every Trojan perished in the flames or chains. Among the survivors was Aeneas, son of Anchises and Venus, Aphrodite in the Greek telling, a prince of the royal house of Dardanus. In the Greek accounts of the Iliad and later epics, Aeneas is a brave warrior who fights Achilles to a standstill, is rescued by the gods more than once, and escapes the city's fall because fate has reserved a greater destiny for him and his descendants. But in the Roman tradition, especially as crystallized in Virgil's Aeneid, composed under Augustus to glorify the origins of the empire, Aeneas becomes the embodiment of Roman virtues: pietas, duty to gods, family, and state; gravitas, endurance and selfless leadership. He is not merely a survivor, he is pious Aeneas, the man who carries his household gods, his father, and his son out of the burning city, obeying divine commands even when they tear at his heart. The night Troy fell, as the wooden horse disgorged its deadly cargo and the streets ran with blood, Aeneas fought in the palace and on the rooftops. He saw Priam cut down at the altar, Cassandra dragged from the temple, Polyxena sacrificed, his wife Creusa vanished in the chaos. When he searched for her amid the smoke, her ghost appeared and told him not to linger. His destiny lay elsewhere, in a western land where a new kingdom awaited. Venus, his mother, appeared in visible form, parting the clouds of war to show him the gods themselves destroying the city they had once favored. She urged him to flee. Aeneas gathered what he could: Anchises, old and lame, whom he carried on his shoulders; Ascanius, called Iulus by the Romans, progenitor of the Julian line, his young son, the Penates and Lares, the sacred household gods of Troy, the images of the Trojan deities. With a small band of loyal followers, he escaped through the flames and shadows, reaching the hills outside the city. There, on Mount Ida, the survivors gathered. They built ships from the forests of Antandros and prepared to sail into the unknown, guided by prophecies that spoke of an ancient homeland in the west, a land called Italy, where Dardanus himself had originated. Their first landing was in Thrace, where Aeneas began to found a city called Aeneadae. But ill omens appeared. When he sacrificed, the earth bled when he uprooted a myrtle bush to make an altar. The voice of Polydorus, a Trojan prince murdered by the Thracian king for gold, rose from the ground, warning them to leave this cursed soil. They sailed again. They came to Delos, sacred island of Apollo. An oracle there told them to seek their ancient motherland. Anchises interpreted this as Crete, home of Tytila, another ancestor. They sailed to Crete and began to build Pergamum, but plague struck, crops failed, and the Penates appeared to Aeneas in a dream, revealing that Italy, not Crete, was the true goal, the land promised by Dardanus. They left Crete. Storms drove them to the Strophades Islands, home of the Harpies. The Harpies, monstrous birdwomen, fouled their feasts. When they attacked, Celaeno, chief of the Harpies, prophesied that they would reach Italy, but suffer such hunger that they would eat their tables. The Trojans fled in terror. They passed the island of Latrai, then reached Buthrotum in Epirus. There they found Hector's widow, Andromache, and her new husband Helenus, once a Trojan prince and seer, now ruling a small Greek city. Helenus welcomed them and gave prophecies. They must sail past Scylla and Charybdis, but avoid the Sicilian coast where Cyclopes dwelt. They would know they had reached their destined land when they found a white sow with 30 piglets under an ilex tree. They must not fight the Latins but seek alliance through marriage. Heartened, they sailed on. Passing the Sirens' rocks, Aeneas blocked the ears of his men with wax as Odysseus had done. They skirted the whirlpool Charybdis and the monster Scylla. They landed in Sicily, welcomed by King Acestes, a Trojan by descent. The Anchises died of old age. Aeneas buried him with great rites on Mount Eryx and founded a city called Acesta in his memory. They set sail again, but Juno, still hating the Trojan race, stirred Iulus to loose the winds. A terrible storm scattered the fleet. Neptune rose from the deep, calmed the waves, and rebuked the winds. One ship, commanded by Palinurus, was lost. The steersman fell overboard and drowned. The survivors reached Carthage, the new city being built by Queen Dido Alyssa, a Phoenician exile who had fled Tyre after her husband Sychaeus was murdered by her brother Pygmalion. Dido welcomed the Trojans with royal hospitality. Venus, fearing Juno's enmity, caused Dido to fall deeply in love with Aeneas. She showed him her city, shared her griefs, and invited him to tell the tale of Troy's fall. For many nights Aeneas recounted the war, the death of Hector, the wooden horse, the night of slaughter, his escape. Dido listened, entranced. She confessed her love to her sister Anna. Juno saw an opportunity to bind Aeneas to Carthage and prevent his reaching Italy. She and Venus contrived a hunt during which a storm drove Dido and Aeneas into a cave. There they consummated their union, and Dido called it marriage. Jupiter, however, sent Mercury to remind Aeneas of his destiny. Aeneas, torn between love and duty, ordered the fleet to prepare secretly for departure. Juno discovered the plan. She raged, pleaded, cursed. When Aeneas, heavy-hearted, confirmed he must obey the gods, she feigned calm, then built a funeral pyre in her palace courtyard. She climbed it, lay on the bed where they had loved, and stabbed herself with Aeneas's sword. As she died, her pyre blazed high, a beacon of sorrow and fury. Aeneas saw the flames from his ship and wept, knowing the gods had forced this cruelty upon him. He sailed away. They returned to Sicily for funeral games in honor of Anchises, the first celebration of what would become the Roman Parentalia and other rites. During the games, Juno sent Iris to incite the Trojan women, weary of wandering, to burn the ships. Aeneas prayed to Jupiter. A rainstorm quenched the flames, but 4 ships were lost. Nautes, an old counselor, advised Aeneas to leave the weary in Sicily. Aeneas did so, founding Acesta permanently. Palinurus, still lost at sea, appeared to Aeneas in a dream, begging burial. Aeneas promised it. They sailed on to Cumae in Italy, home of the Sibyl, prophetess of Apollo. The Sibyl, Deiphobe, received Aeneas in her vast cave. She prophesied wars in Latium, but eventual victory and a great city. Aeneas asked to descend into the underworld to see his father Anchises again. The Sibyl told him he must find the golden bough in a sacred grove and bring it as offering to Proserpina. With help from Venus, who sent doves to guide him, Aeneas found the bough. He performed the required sacrifices. The Sibyl led him to the entrance near Lake Avernus. They passed through the cave, crossed the Styx with the help of Charon, who at first refused the living Aeneas until the golden bough was shown, avoided Cerberus, drugged with a honeycake, saw the mourning fields of the suicides and the criminals in Tartarus, and reached the Elysian fields. There Anchises showed Aeneas the souls waiting to be reborn, explained Roman destiny, and revealed the future line of heroes: Romulus, the kings, Brutus, the Scipios, Julius Caesar, Augustus himself, the glory of Rome foretold. Aeneas returned to the upper world through the ivory gate of false dreams, strengthened but burdened by the vision. They sailed north along the coast to the Tiber mouth, in the land of Latium, ruled by King Latinus of the Latins. Latinus welcomed them. He had received an oracle. His daughter Lavinia must marry a foreign husband, whose descendants would rule the world. When Aeneas arrived, Latinus saw the fulfillment. He offered alliance and Lavinia's hand, but Juno would not allow easy victory. She sent Alecto, a fury, to madden Turnus, prince of the Rutulians, to whom Lavinia had been betrothed. Turnus, inflamed with rage and pride, gathered the Italian tribes against the Trojans. War broke out. The first bloodshed came when Ascanius killed Silvia's stag, sacred to the nymphs. The Latins attacked. Aeneas sought help from Evander, king of the Arcadians on the future site of Rome. Evander welcomed him, showed him the humble village on the Palatine, and sent his son Pallas with a force to aid the Trojans. Venus persuaded Vulcan to forge new armor for Aeneas, shield depicting Roman history. Romulus and Remus, the Sabine women, the kings, Actium, Augustus's triumph. War raged. Turnus killed Pallas in single combat, taking his belt as trophy. Aeneas, grief-stricken, slaughtered Rutulians in fury. He captured 4 sons of Sulmo and 4 of Ufens to sacrifice at Pallas's pyre, a grim act echoing Achilles' rage. A truce was made for burials. But Juno sent Juturna, Turnus's sister and a nymph, to break it. Fighting resumed. Camilla, warrior princess of the Volsci, led a fierce charge and killed many Trojans before Aruns, guided by Apollo, killed her with a spear. Diana mourned her favorite. His son, or grandson, Servius Tullius, followed. Born a slave but favored by the gods, flames miraculously played around his head as a child. He married Tarquinius's daughter. He reorganized the army and people by wealth classes, centuries and tribes, built the Servian wall, expanded the Pomerium. The Tarquin line ended with Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, arrogant and cruel. His son Sextus raped Lucretia, noble wife of Collatinus. Lucretia killed herself, sparking outrage. Brutus led the revolt, expelled the Tarquins, and Rome became a republic. But that is the bridge to the next age, the Republic, with its own myths of heroes like Horatius Cocles, Mucius Scaevola, Clocelia, Coriolanus, and the sacred geese of the Capitol. The reign of Lucius Tarquinius Superbus marked the end of the monarchy in Roman legend. Superbus, the proud, ruled not with consent but by terror. He murdered senators, refused to consult the Senate, executed rivals without trial, and forced the people into endless labor on public works like the completion of the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill. His sons were no better, arrogant and cruel. The crisis came through Sextus Tarquinius, the youngest son. While campaigning with his father, Sextus visited the house of Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, a nobleman of the Tarquine family but loyal to the king. Collatinus boasted of his wife Lucretia's virtue. Sextus, inflamed by desire, returned alone to Collatinus's house in Calacia, while the husband was away. Lucretia received him as a guest under the laws of hospitality. In the night, Sextus entered her chamber, threatened her with death and dishonor, placing a slave beside her to make it appear adultery, and raped her. Lucretia, overwhelmed by shame, summoned her father Spurius Lucretius and her husband Collatinus, along with Lucius Junius Brutus, a relative who had feigned stupidity to survive under the Tarquins, hence his cognomen Brutus, the dullard. She told them what had happened, made them swear vengeance, and then drove a knife into her heart, saying, "If there is any honor left in Rome, let this blood be the last of the kings." Her body was carried to the Forum in Rome. Brutus, throwing off his pretended foolishness, harangued the people. The Tarquins had oppressed them, violated their wives, and treated Romans as slaves. The crowd rose in fury. Brutus led them to the city gates, locked them, and expelled the king and his family. Tarquinius Superbus, campaigning against Ardea, learned of the revolt and marched on Rome. The gates were shut. He tried to regain power through allies in the Latin League but failed. The monarchy was abolished. Traditionally in 509 BCE, Brutus and Collatinus became the first consuls. To prevent any return of kingship, an oath was sworn. Never again would one man hold supreme power in Rome. The new republic faced immediate threats. Tarquinius Superbus sought help from Lars Porsena, king of Clusium in Etruria. Porsena marched on Rome with a large army. The Romans defended the city fiercely. In one of the most famous legends, Publius Horatius Cocles held the Pons Sublicius, the wooden bridge over the Tiber, alone against the Etruscan advance, while his comrades cut the bridge behind him. Horatius, with two companions, Spurius Latius and Titus Herminius in some versions, fought off wave after wave. When the bridge was nearly severed, he sent his companions back and stood alone. He addressed the Etruscans, defying them in the name of Roman liberty. Arrows and spears rained down, but he held firm. When the bridge finally collapsed, Horatius prayed to Father Tiber and leaped into the river in full armor. He swam to the Roman side amid cheers. The city was saved. For the moment, Porsena besieged Rome. Food grew scarce. A young noble, Gaius Mucius Cordus, later Scaevola, left-handed, resolved to kill the king. He infiltrated the Etruscan camp, but mistook the royal scribe for Porsena and killed the wrong man. Seized and brought before Porsena, Mucius thrust his right hand into a sacrificial fire and let it burn, saying, "See how cheaply we Romans hold our bodies when honor is at stake." Porsena, astonished by this courage, freed him and eventually made peace with Rome, withdrawing his army. Mucius's left hand became a symbol of Roman endurance. Another heroine emerged during the siege. Callataia, a young Roman virgin held hostage by Porsena, escaped with a band of maidens. They swam the Tiber on horseback under enemy arrows and returned to their families. Porsena demanded her return as part of the treaty. When she was sent back, he admired her bravery so much that he freed her and allowed her to take back any hostages she chose. She chose young boys, the future fathers of Rome. A statue of Callataia on horseback was erected in the Forum. Peace with Porsena did not end the wars. The Tarquins continued to intrigue. In 498 BCE, or nearby dates in legend, the Battle of Lake Regillus saw the Dioscuri Castor and Pollux appear on the Roman side, fighting in white armor and then watering their horses at the Forum spring. Their temple was vowed and built in thanks. Internal strife also began. The plebeians, common people, suffered under patrician dominance, high debts, harsh laws, no political voice. In 494 BCE, they seceded to the sacred mount Mons Sassa outside the city, refusing to serve in the army or work until rights were granted. Menenius Agrippa, a patrician, persuaded them to return by telling the fable of the belly and the members. The body cannot live if the parts refuse to cooperate. The plebeians won the creation of the tribunes of the plebs, magistrates with veto power, lawsus intercessions, to protect them from arbitrary punishment. The struggle continued. In 451–450 BCE, the decemvirs, 10 men, were appointed to codify the laws. They produced the 12 Tables, Rome's first written code, inscribed on bronze and set in the Forum. When the second decemvirate, led by Appius Claudius, refused to step down and tried to seize power, another secession occurred. Appius was imprisoned and died, or committed suicide. The 12 Tables remained the foundation of Roman law for centuries. Another legend of virtue came with Gnaeus Marcius Coriolanus, a patrician hero who earned his cognomen by capturing the Volscian town of Corioli. He opposed grain distribution to the plebeians during a famine. Exiled for his arrogance, he joined the Volsci under Aufidius and marched on Rome. His mother Vituria and wife Volumnia, with his young son, met him outside the city and begged him to spare it. Moved by family piety, Coriolanus withdrew. The Volsci later killed him for treason, or in some versions he lived on in exile. The Fabian gens provided a tragic myth of collective courage. In 4077 BCE, the Fabian volunteered to guard a pass against the Viantes people of Veii. All but one boy were ambushed and killed at the Cremera River. The single survivor rebuilt the gens. Rome's greatest early crisis came in 390 BCE, or 387 in some chronologies, with the Gallic sack. Brennus, a Gallic chieftain, defeated the Romans at the Allia River. The city was abandoned except for the Capitol. The sacred geese of Juno on the Capitoline cackled and woke Marcus Manlius Capitolinus. When the Gauls tried a night climb, Manlius threw them down the cliff. After a 7-month siege, the Romans paid a ransom in gold. Brennus, when the weights were false, threw his sword on the scale, crying, "Vae victis," woe to the vanquished. Marcus Furius Camillus, dictator in exile, returned, defeated the Gauls as they left, recovered the gold, and was hailed as a second founder of Rome, Romulus Secundus. Camillus's career embodied Roman piety and renewal. He vowed a temple to Mater Matuta, dedicated the Temple of Concord after civil strife, and refused a kingship offered by the people. His triumphs were tempered by exile, accused of embezzlement, and eventual recall. Throughout these years, the gods remained central. The Sibylline books, purchased by Tarquinius Superbus from the Cumaean Sibyl, or in some versions by later kings, were consulted in crises. They advised building temples, Apollo, Ceres, Liber, Libera, introducing Greek cults, and performing expiatory rites. Janus's temple doors stood open in war, closed in peace, a rare honor. Vesta's eternal fire, tended by the Vestals, symbolized the city's life. Mars, father of Romulus, was honored with the Lupercalia, February 15, when youths ran naked, striking women for fertility. Saturnalia, December, recalled the golden age of Saturn with feasting and role reversal. These early republic myths reinforced Roman identity. Liberty over monarchy, collective virtue over individual power, piety toward gods and family, endurance in adversity. They set the stage for greater conflicts, the Samnite Wars, Paris of Epirus, and especially the Punic Wars. The early republic's myths had emphasized collective virtue, the balance of patrician and plebeian, and the gods' favor on a city that refused kingship. By the 2nd century BCE, that balance had begun to crack under the weight of conquest, wealth from the provinces, and the rise of individual commanders whose armies owed loyalty to generals rather than the state. The myths of this era shift from communal heroism to tragic figures who challenged the old order, divine warnings ignored, and the slow emergence of men who claimed or were granted near-divine status. The Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Sempronius Gracchus, became the first great reformers and the first martyrs of the late Republic. Tiberius, tribune in 1303 BCE, proposed land redistribution to give public land, ager publicus to the poor, limiting holdings to prevent the creation of vast latifundia worked by slaves. He invoked ancient laws and the ideal of the sturdy Roman farmer-soldier. Portents appeared. When he began his legislation, sacred chickens refused to eat a bad augury, and ravens fought in the forum. Opponents accused him of tyranny. On the day he sought re-election, unprecedented for a tribune, a riot broke out. Publius Cornelius Scipio Nasica, Serapio, led a mob of senators and clients to the Capitol, where Tiberius was clubbed to death beside the Temple of Jupiter. His body was thrown into the Tiber like the infants Romulus and Remus once saved from the river. Gaius Gracchus, younger brother, became tribune in 1203 and 112 and 122 BCE. He expanded reforms: grain laws to feed the poor, colonies for veterans, jury courts open to equites roads, and a proposed citizenship extension to Italian allies. He too claimed divine inspiration, saying he had dreamed of his brother urging him on. When opponents blocked his laws, violence erupted. In 1201 BCE, the Senate passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, the first ultimate decree allowing consuls to protect the state by any means. Opimius led armed forces against Gaius on the Aventine. Thousands died. Gaius ordered his slave to kill him. His head was cut off, filled with molten lead, and presented to Opimius for reward. The Aventine became a place of mourning, and the Gracchi were remembered as champions of the people whose deaths marked the beginning of civil bloodshed. Gaius Marius, the Novus Homo from Arpinum, rose through military success against Jugurtha in Numidia. In 107 BCE, he was elected consul for the first time, breaking the patrician monopoly. He reorganized the army, recruiting landless proletari who swore personal loyalty to him. Omens surrounded his career. Lightning struck the walls of Arpinum at his birth, and eagles nested in his cradle. During the Cimbrian and Teutonic invasions, 113–101 BCE, he won victories at Aquae Sextia and Vercellae. The people hailed him as third founder of Rome after Romulus and Camillus. He held 6 consulships, unprecedented, yet his rivalry with Sulla would tear the Republic apart. Lucius Cornelius Sulla Felix claimed divine favor more explicitly. During the Social War and the March on Rome in 88 BCE, he consulted oracles and sacrificed prodigiously. When he captured Rome, the first Roman to do so with his own army, he declared himself Sulla Felix the Fortunate, claiming fortune herself guided him. After his dictatorship 82–79 BCE, he retired to his villa, saying the gods had granted him what they willed. Proscriptions, massacres, and constitutional reforms marked his rule, but he presented himself as restorer of the old republic, even as he weakened it. The Catilinarian conspiracy of 63 BCE gave Marcus Tullius Cicero his moment of greatest fame. Cicero, another Novus Homo, consul that year, uncovered Catiline's plot to burn Rome and murder magistrates. He delivered the famous Catilinarian orations in the Senate. In the first he began, Quousque tandem abutere, Catilina patientia nostra. Cicero claimed divine aid. Jupiter Stator had inspired him. The gods had revealed the plot through dreams and portents, lightning strikes, falling statues. He executed the conspirators without trial. Under the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, Cicero styled himself Father of the Fatherland, Pater Patriae, the savior who had preserved the Republic. Later writers saw his career as a tragic arc. The man who boasted of saving Rome would be proscribed and killed in 43 BCE by the Second Triumvirate. Pompey the Great. Grenius Pompeius Magnus cultivated a divine aura. After victories in Africa, he celebrated a triumph wearing Alexander's cloak taken from Mithridates. He built the first permanent stone theatre in Rome, with a temple to Venus Victrix atop the cavea. His eastern campaigns against the pirates, Mithridates, Tigran, made him richer than kings. He claimed descent from Venus through Picus and Faunus. When he returned in 61 BCE, he celebrated a third triumph, parading captives and treasures, styling himself the Great as Alexander had been. Julius Caesar went further. As Pontifex Maximus from 63 BCE, he controlled the calendar and religious rites. During the Gallic Wars 58 to 50 BCE, he claimed descent from Venus Genetrix through Aelius, and from the kings of Alba Longa. At Phaselis, 48 BCE, he vowed a temple to Venus Victrix if victorious. After winning, he built the Forum Iulium with the temple of Venus Genetrix at its head. Omens attended him. A comet appeared during his funeral games in 44 BCE, interpreted as his soul ascending to the stars. The Senate deified him posthumously in 42 BCE, as Divus Julius, with a temple, flamen, and cult statue. The month Quintilis was renamed July. The Republic's collapse accelerated after Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March 44 BCE. Mark Antony, Octavian, the future Augustus, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate. Proscriptions killed Cicero and thousands more. At Philippi 42 BCE, the triumvirids defeated Brutus and Cassius. Octavian and Antony divided the world. Lepidus was sidelined. Octavian, adopted son of Caesar, claimed divine heritage. He styled himself Divi Filius, son of the god. In 31 BCE, at Actium he defeated Antony and Cleopatra. The victory was presented as Apollo's triumph over Eastern chaos. Antony identified with Dionysus, Cleopatra with Isis. Octavian closed the doors of Janus's temple, symbolizing universal peace for the first time in centuries. In 27 BCE, the Senate granted him the name Augustus, the revered one. He refused kingship, but accepted imperium maius and tribunician power. He began a vast mythological program to legitimize his rule and restore Roman values. He commissioned Virgil to write the Aeneid, linking his house directly to Aeneas, and therefore to Venus and Jupiter's plan for Rome. The poem ends with Augustus foretold as bringer of peace, conqueror of the world. Livius ab Urbe Condita presented Roman history as a moral progression from Romulus to Augustus, with the Republic's fall as necessary for renewal. He built the Ara Passis Augusti, altar of Augustan peace, depicting the imperial family in procession with gods and personifications, Pax, Tellus, Roma. The mausoleum of Augustus became a dynastic tomb. The Forum Augustum displayed statues of great Romans and Alban kings, with Mars Altor at the center, vowed at Philippi, and Venus Genetrix. The Julio-Claudian dynasty continued the blend of myth and power. Tiberius, Augustus's successor 1437 CE, withdrew to Capri, surrounded by omens, falling statues, strange lights, dreams. He was rumored to practice dark rites. Caligula, 37–341 CE. His murder ended the experiment. Claudius 41–54 CE, found hiding behind a curtain after Caligula's death, was proclaimed emperor by the Praetorians. He claimed divine descent through Augustus and deified his grandmother Livia. He expanded the Pomerium, built aqueducts, and was deified after death. Nero, 54–68 CE, presented himself as Apollo Citharodus, the divine musician and artist. He sang on stage, raced chariots, and built the Domus Aurea after the Great Fire of 64 CE. Christians and later historians blamed him for the fire. He scapegoated them. Omens surrounded his fall. The doors of Janus opened of themselves. The lake of Agrippa dried up. When the Senate declared him enemy of the state, he committed suicide, ending the Julio-Claudian line. These emperors were not merely rulers. They were woven into the fabric of Roman myth, descendants of gods, restorers of rights, recipients of portents, and eventually gods themselves. The Republic's fall had birthed an empire where the line between human excellence and divine favor blurred forever. When Octavian defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra at Actium in 31 BCE and became Augustus in 27 BCE, he did not merely win a civil war. He won the power to rewrite Rome's soul. The Republic had died in blood and ambition. The empire was born in myth. Augustus understood that a city built on stories could only be ruled by stories. He set out to make Roman mythology serve the new order, to link his rule to Aeneas, Romulus, Venus, Apollo, and every virtue the old tales celebrated. The gods were not retired, they were repurposed. First came the physical reshaping of the city. Augustus boasted he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble, but the marble carried messages. On the Palatine Hill he built his house beside the hut of Romulus, simple on the outside, magnificent within, symbolizing the princeps as the new Romulus without the name of king. Next to it rose the temple of Apollo Palatinus, vowed after Actium. Apollo, the god of light, prophecy, and Augustus's patron, received a temple of dazzling white marble, with statues of the Danudes and their murdered husbands in the porticos, a reminder of civil war's cost and Augustus's role as peacemaker. Inside stood the Sibylline books, transferred from the Temple of Jupiter to this new sanctuary, binding old prophecy to the new regime. The Ara Pacis Augustae, altar of Augustan peace, dedicated in 9 BCE, was the most ambitious mythological program. Its reliefs showed Aeneas sacrificing the white sow with 30 piglets, the sign of Latium, Romulus and Remus with the she-wolf, Tellus earth with children and fruits, Roma seated on weapons, and the imperial family processing in pious order. The altar stood in the Campus Martius, aligned with the horologium sundial of Augustus and his mausoleum. On the summer solstice, the shadow of the obelisk pointed to the altar's center, cosmic time ratifying Augustan peace as the fulfillment of fate. The Forum of Augustus, dedicated in 2 BCE, completed the propaganda. In its exedre stood statues of the Summi Viri, great men of Rome's past paired with their legendary ancestors, Aeneas with his Trojan forebears, Romulus with the Alban kings. Augustus placed himself at the end of both lines, descendant of gods and heroes, the culmination of history. Literature was conscripted. Virgil, already famous for the eclogues and Georgics, was commissioned to write the Aeneid, the national epic. He labored for 11 years, reworking Homer, Aeneas, and the old legends into a poem of destiny. Aeneas as the suffering, dutiful founder whose sacrifices Dido, Turnus, his own happiness, paved the way for Rome. The poem ends with Jupiter's promise of imperium sine fine, empire without end. Virgil died before final revisions. Augustus ordered its publication anyway. It became scripture. Schoolboys memorized it. Emperors quoted it. Christians later allegorized it. Horace contributed the Carmen Saculare for the Ludi Saculares of 17 BCE, a festival marking the dawn of a new saculum age. The poem invoked Apollo and Diana, asked for fertility, peace, and virtue, and hailed Augustus as the restorer of morals. The games themselves revived ancient rites, sacrifices to the Moirae, Fates, Ilithiae childbirth, Terra Mater, and the Capitoline Triad, with choirs of boys and girls singing Horace's hymn. The Sibylline oracle had commanded these rites every 110 years. Augustus made them celebrate his era. Ovid, the last great poet of myth, gave Rome its encyclopedia of transformation. The Metamorphoses, completed around 8 CE, strung together Greek and Roman tales of change, from chaos to Julius Caesar's comet, into a continuous narrative of flux and renewal. The Fasti, his unfinished calendar poem, explained the origins of Roman festivals, why the Lupercalia involved naked runners, why the Matronalia honored Juno, why Vesta's fire must never die. When Ovid was exiled to Tomis in 8 CE, officially for Carmen et Error, a poem and a mistake, likely the Ars Amatoria and complicity in a scandal involving Augustus's daughter Julia, he lamented the loss of Rome, but left behind the richest compendium of her myths. With the poets came divinity. Julius Caesar had been deified after his assassination in 42 BCE. His comet, the Sidus Iulium, seen as proof of apotheosis. A temple to Divus Julius rose in the Forum. A star crowned his statue. Augustus, adopted son, styled himself Divi Filius. After his death in 14 CE, the Senate declared him Divus Augustus. Temples sprang up across the empire. In Rome, the Temple of Divus Augustus on the Palatine. In the provinces, altars to Roma et Augustus. The imperial cult spread rapidly. Priests, Augustus. Games, sacrifices. Refusal could be treason. The genius of the emperor, his divine protecting spirit, was honored alongside household lares. Vows were made to the numen divine power of the living princeps. Augustus refused temples to himself in Rome while alive, but accepted them in the provinces as Roma et Augustus. The myth was clear. The emperor was the god's instrument, the new link between heaven and earth. Rome is gone, but its myths are not. They live wherever men tell tales of duty, destiny, transformation, and the struggle between human ambition and divine will. And so the story ends, not with a fall but with an eternal recurrence. As long as people look to the stars named for Roman gods, or speak of fortune and fate, or build monuments to lasting glory, the myths of Rome endure. Thank you for journeying through the entire story with me. May your own path be as pious as Aeneas's, as enduring as Romulus's, and as luminous as Apollo's light over the eternal city.